What is up, my ninjas? I'm Strident, and this is a review of the MOTUC Classics King Hiss and Snake Armor He-Man. I'm a pretty casual but fairly lifelong He-Man fan. The 2000 XX series was what pushed me over into being a true fan. I always felt, and I've said this before in other reviews of these figures, that they were just too non-violent for a bunch of guys running around with swords and guns and, you know, weapons to maim and kill. So, you know, I loved how they upgraded the level of intensity that was in the show. Another thing I love is the design work. All of the designs, all across the board, are way better than the classic versions. Have whatever kind of bias, have whatever kind of nostalgic itch that you need to have those, but you have to admit, these upgraded designs just look better. The whole fact that they mimic different eras here on Earth, as well as the different design cues that were present in the original figures, they just went full on awesome with them, you know, so it felt like a full on realized world. So that's what drew me to this collection. So yeah, I mostly cherry picked, and these are some of the ones I cherry picked, and I got these when they came out. I think the set was like 65 bucks, because these figures are usually about 35 a piece. It's been about a year or so, but I told you guys I was going to do it. It was at the end of one of my other reviews, so here we are, and I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty, the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the in-between, and all the greatness that made me want to have them in the first place. So here we go. Accessories. These guys don't have a shitload of accessories, and I like that they have specifically what you saw them use in the show. The only thing that's missing from these two, it's mainly with King Hiss, is that you don't have the gimmick where his upper torso comes off and you can just put the, or it comes apart and then the snakes pop out. They didn't include that, that's a separate thing. But, you know, he has his staff, He-Man has his sword, and his claw thing. That's all He-Man used when he was in this mode, and I love it. This was a mode that I missed out on the first time when they released this in the 2000 XX line. So it's nice to finally have, you know, probably the best version of this suit. I forgot to mention that King Hiss also comes with this awesome shield. I think he used it like at one point in the series. It wasn't something that he used often. And if he didn't use it in the series, the original toy definitely came with it. And that's why it's present here. I can't remember which one is which. Like I said, I was more into the, I don't remember the vintage stuff. I was more into, sorry, I'm using my back scratcher. I was more into the 2000 stuff and not so much the vintage versions, you know? But everything is sculpted to the fucking nines. I mean, the details are insane. Things that you didn't realize had extra detail in the show have extra detail on the figure. And I love when sculptors do that, because I mean, it has to be boring for them to just do flat surface after flat surface after flat surface. So for them to give extra dimensionality to all these parts, it just makes the figure that much better. And this is a figure, I mean, it's He-Man. He-Man's kind of a very plain barbarian design, and for them to add to it and make it that much more interesting, it just makes everything better. And the fact that instead of making the claw like a gimmick piece, it's just a you know, piece that you clip on, I think that's freaking awesome. That's the way it should be. You know, he had it, and you have the option of using it when you need to use it, and it's a sturdy piece, and taking it off and playing with them without it. And, you know, these figures, even though they are collector's items, they're very well built, which makes you believe they're done for play purposes. And you know me, I am going to play with my figures. And I've played with these guys. Nothing popped off. Nothing got loose. I love it, man. These are some really well done, well made figures. Now, a well done figure is all well and good, but if the sculpt is shitty, then you really don't have that great of a figure. But in this case, I mean, it's the Four Horsemen. They are the original sculptors of the original series, and they're the guys who went back and did these, so you already know the sculpt is phenomenal. There's no issues here with the sculpt. None. Zero, zilch, nada. I don't have a single issue with any sculpted detail on these figures. Everything works. And the paint, my God, it's simple, but it does the job. It's applied well. This is why when people diss Mattel, I'm like, yeah, I kind of can't diss them fully, because, you know, just like with DCUC, you have some amazing DCUC figures that were well painted, well sculpted, and they were figures that people they were characters that people weren't super familiar with. So those characters kind of, no one talks about them, you know? But characters like Magog, I'm sorry, I keep saying his name wrong. Characters like Stell and Stripe, they all have really good details, and the same thing goes for these guys. The details are amazing throughout. One thing I find with them is that the bad guys tend to get a lot of the extra detail, like consistently throughout their whole design. And I don't know if it's because they enjoy making villains more than they enjoy doing heroes. I mean, when I look at the Mythic Legion stuff that they've done, I think they enjoy both. But I could be wrong. I don't know. But when you're looking at what you got here, it looks like they enjoy villain details and such. Every time a villain has, you know, armor or scales or claws or something like that, these guys go nuts and give you, you know, all that extra detail to make you see how powerful these characters are. And I love it. It's interesting, and it makes the characters stand out. And on a shelf, that looks beautiful. You know what I mean? It's beautiful when you see all this sculpted detail throughout. It's another reason why I mix my McFarlane figures with a lot of my other sword and sandals and my tokusatsu stuff, because you tend to see that kind of a mixture of detail when it comes to villains in a series. I mean, it's like that all across the various Figuarts lines when it comes to villains. The villains have all the textured skin and the blah 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 and this and that, and the heroes tend to have a couple textures, but overall their designs are pretty simple. In this, both designs are fairly complex, but the villain definitely has the more complex design of the two. But I love it. I mean, it's so much. I mean, you can see I had a shitload of fun playing with these two, and I couldn't do the review without these effects, because I was like, I have to have this in the review. So yeah, everything works. Everything works well, you know. I'm not at all disappointed with any part of these guys, you know. And it's strange because, you know, I want to have bad things to say, because I hate the fact that, and that sounds bad, but I hate how expensive these guys are. I think it's kind of unfair. I think this should have been a retail line, and I don't like the fact that, you know, you had to, if you didn't get them when they first come out, sometimes you're screwed with some of these releases. But, you know, other ones that weren't as popular, you can find them on Amazon, and you can find them on eBay for decent prices. And, you know, overall, they sell, the prices on the secondary market have been pretty good, so I won't complain too much. But, you know, I want to have more negatives to say, you know? I feel like sometimes I'm not doing my job when I don't have a negative. But overall, you know, when I'm looking at the sculpt, you know, just objectively, I'm not even talking about my connection to the series, just objectively, these are some awesome sculpts. These are examples of what they can do in this series, you know? And the fact that even though it is accurate to the series, it still has details that are specific to this figure. And I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. I can't complain. It makes it that much more worth it for me. And, you know, it really helps make me happier to have these toys in my collection. So, you know, I think if you're a fan of swords and sorcery and stuff like that, then these guys are a must-have in your collection, and their sculpts tell the tale. I mean, just look at them. They're freaking phenomenal. Look at that gauntlet. Jesus. All right, so we're going to take a look real quick at the articulation on these guys. Now, I'm going to do it on this video, and I don't think I'm going to go back and do articulation for Masters figures unless there's something important that's different from all the rest. With these guys, unlike, you know, the regular He-Man, they have armor bits. Actually, let me use my pointer.
They have armor bits like right up in here. This is all an armored piece. It's rubber. You can I don't think you can remove this, but on some of them you can, and the same goes for him. On this side, he's kind of a little bit restricted because you can see his arm is kind of resting farther out than it does on this side. So, you know, sometimes the armor will restrict things, but I'm not going to go over every single one just to tell you that the armor possibly restricts things. That just seems redundant, and I don't want to go there. So we will start with, I think I'll use He-Man because, you know, King Hiss is holding this large thingamajig. Okay, so He-Man has the basic kind of universal shoulder joint. I like this because these joints are actually really stiff. There's an issue. I'll get to the lower half and then I'll talk about this issue. But anyway, arm moves up and down, up this much, down this much, forward this much, up this much. You could probably do a 360, especially if you didn't have the sword in there, but why would you want to do a 360 with a human being? Joints don't work that way. Arm bends at the elbow a little bit less than 90 degrees. You've got a twist here. You've got a bicep swivel. It's kind of stiff though. Head turns left to right. Looks up that much. Looks down that much. You know, you get a little bit of tilts. It's got an ab crunch that works really well. Move that much forward and that much, wow, that much backward. Why is it always that they move further back than they do forward? On this arm, like I said, it's a little bit restricted, but everything is about the same. This shoulder pad here is not connected in the back, so that when you put the arm up as high as you can, it's not restricted. But all the articulation is there. Wrist moves just like it did on the other side. Let me get this out the way. Wrist moves just like it did on the other side. Bicep swivel works just like it did on the other side. Really nice. Waist swivel. Legs move out this much. Marvel Legends need to take heed of this, because how can a guy this big do the complete splits and, you know, hold it, you know, but then freaking Captain Marvel and characters like this that are smaller with nothing in their way can only go that far. Doesn't make sense. Captain America can't even go that far. That's just stupid. Anyway, moves this far forward despite having this loincloth tunic piece or whatever. Moves back that much because his butt doesn't really stop it, you see. Knee bends 90 degrees exactly. It's pretty dope. His ankles are really stiff, but they point, and they have a little bit of a tiny bit of ankle pivot. But you know, it's decent articulation. I don't have any issues with it because it works for a character this big. And the thing I was gonna say is that the ankles on King Grayskull, if you had King Grayskull, and I'll show you on him because I have him sitting right here, his ankles are just really floppy. See that? And a lot of times when you stand him up, he'll lean forward because the ankles are so floppy. Now they corrected this since, I want to say, Vicor. I'm not sure. I want to say Vicor was the first one with the corrected ones, the corrected ankles. And so was, supposedly, I think a lot of people were expecting the Toys R Us 2-pack He-Man, the one that came with Superman. We were expecting him to have corrected joints, but he also has the same problems. I don't know for sure, but I think it's around the time Vicor came out, because I got all of those guys around the same time, that they started correcting them, because Vicor, or Conan in my case, does not have those ankles, and everyone since then has had the stiffer ankles. So anyway, that's his articulation in a nutshell. King Hiss is about the same, with the exception of the head. His head doesn't have the same kind of freedom of movement that He-Man's does, because he has this big old, you know, helmet with the pieces hanging down on the sides. His arms don't go all the way down, just like He-Man's on this side, because you have all that armor, but everything else is the same. He even has a little bit more you know, pivot in his feet than He-Man does. So that's it for this part.
And of course, we've now come to the bottom line. It's felt like a short review. these are some stellar figures. They're totally worth their price. I mean, $60 for 2 figures. Typically, these figures run $35 to $40 a piece. You can see what the money was spent on. You know what I mean? You can see why they earned their price. The paint details, you have tiny, small details. Tiny, small details. You have tiny details that are amazing and well done. The paint is applied properly and fully. It's not very, crappy, splotchy, paint. It's very well done paint. I enjoy looking at these figures. I enjoy playing with these figures. They're easy to play with because everything makes sense. They're not complex and difficult to pose. So, if you're even remotely a fan of these guys, then, this is a must get. If you like that series, which I haven't really met people who didn't like the Mike Young Productions He-Man series from the early 2000s. It was, in my opinion, the perfect, revamp of He-Man. If they made a movie, they need to follow that, because the original stuff was confusing, and a lot of the stuff, it existed, but it wasn't part of the same canon. It was just goofs that the artists did here or the writers did here, because these were all tie-in things. But it's awesome to have another form for He-Man, you know what I mean, in figure form. I love the fact that it ties into the story in the original one where King Grayskull wore that armor when he was, the protector of Grayskull. That was his gear when he transformed. And now, having King Grayskull, having Battle Lion, and having that suit, you can swap heads. And like you see here, I have that head, the Snake Armor He-Man head, on the King Grayskull body, and it looks like the 2000XX He-Man. It's a beautiful little thing. I mean, I know I've shown you guys this before, but it's just awesome that they went there. It's a good way of giving figures replay value, and a good way to trick you into buying. And I have to say trick because that's what they do. It tricks you into buying certain figures so you can get parts that can be used with other figures. But overall, since I'm a cherry picker, this works for me on so many levels. I love it. I don't have any complaints. Despite me showing you a ton of pictures of, this He-Man, I still got, so much to say about what I actually am reviewing. These figures are just well done figures. They're awesome on your shelf. They're awesome in actual practical application. Everything still works. It's awesome to have a version of King Hiss that actually looks like a threat. He doesn't look goofy with that weird grin on his face and stuff. These figures are a win. Just there's definite S-class stuff. So if you see them, get them, especially if they're for a reasonable price. So this has been my review of Snake Armor He-Man and King Hiss from MOTUC Classics. If you see them, you got to get them. You got to. These are just quality figures. And that's it for me. You guys have been great. And I will catch you on my next review. Peace outside.